everyone! My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to my channel, and today I have another video for you all. Today, unfortunately, we do have a serious topic to discuss. If you have seen anything on my channel before, you know that one of the most important things I talk about is consent. Whenever you're doing BDSM, the first thing you have to have is consent, because otherwise what you're doing is not a scene, it's assault. I know, a really heavy way to start off a video, but I think it is necessary because what we're going to be talking about is the rise in non-consensual choking that has been happening for the last several years, and that is going to get into some pretty dark places. So if you are not prepared for that, you don't want to hear that today, totally understandable. Do feel free to click off of this video and maybe watch one of my other more lighthearted videos I've done recently. So I have heard anecdotally for years from friends, even from some of you all, that oftentimes one of the first ways that you were introduced to BDSM was from a partner suddenly and without warning choking you, spitting on you, or pulling your hair during some kind of intimate act. And sadly, this isn't necessarily surprising. Now, I can only speak for my experience in the American sex ed system. I don't really know how it is everywhere in the world, but around here, a lot of places would much rather prioritize scaring people with movies about AIDS and slideshows of just the worst cases of STIs imaginable, instead of teaching people how to talk about sex and ask for consent. Because of course, if you are talking to teenagers about how to ask about sex, that kind of acknowledges that teenagers are going to have sex with each other. And because in school, people are not talking about that and parents don't want to have that awkward conversation, you combine that with peer pressure and you have a recipe for just disaster, really, at the end of the day, is what it is. But back in my day, though, that lack of clear communication was usually more about condom usage and birth control and STI status, instead of choking someone to blackout without talking about it first. But in the years since I've graduated from school, and especially since I've become a kink educator, it seems that there's been a shift in what it is that people aren't talking about. I have seen the 4-minute video that purports to show you how to choke a girl safely, or the freaking pickup artist channels that tell you that all women want to be choked and doing so unlocks their hidden primal sexuality and they want to be taken by force, and if you do that they'll become your permanent sex slave, or whatever just pure nonsense and swill they're shilling that week. Pickup artists, I'm gonna do a video about it at some point, but just know the rage is barely contained. But getting more back to the point, I have just had more and more people over the years tell me that story that I mentioned at the beginning of this. More and more people saying that a partner is choking them non-consensually or choking them at all without warning. And it's not like this has gone unnoticed by the media. Of course, a lot of places are quick to write articles blaming the so-called epidemic of rough sex in pornography. And there was even a 2014 movie called The Choking Game that was entirely about teenagers getting addicted to choking themselves to nearly blackout and risking their lives for a momentary high. But personally, the only thing that I really had to go off of was those anecdotes. I wasn't really sure how much of a problem this actually was. That was until a recent article by Scientific American came across my Twitter timeline. The title, People Have Been Having Less Sex, whether they're teenagers or 40-somethings, doesn't at first blush appear to be about a rise in non-consensual sex acts. However, the researchers think the two might actually be related. So this isn't necessarily going to be the whole point of the video, so just to quickly summarize what they were looking at here. What they did is they evaluated across a spectrum of age ranges how often people were engaging in certain sex acts. Unlike a lot of studies where they typically only look at penis and vagina intercourse, if the study is looking at heterosexual couples, this included not just that, but also anal, oral, and masturbation practices as well. The researchers initially thought that what would happen is they would see a decrease across the board, except for masturbation and thus porn usage. They did find the across-the-board decrease that they were expecting. However, this was with a twist, because for the older demographic, the percentage of people that had masturbated at least once in the past year stayed the same. However, for teenagers, for adolescents, the number actually went down, and this was the first study that included that information as part of their survey. Now, the Scientific American did interview the lead researchers on this project to try and discuss why exactly they thought this decrease across the board might be happening. Now, note, because we are in the year 2022 at this point, the study looked at the years 2009 and 2018. So this was all before the pandemic. Any effect from the pandemic is not included in these numbers, but they did offer some possible reasons for why this might be the case. Of course, the first one that needed to be brought up, because it's always a specter in conversations like this, was social media usage and video games. Now, like I said, the first year for the study was 2009. That was well after MySpace, well after Facebook, so things like social media and video games weren't exactly a new thing at that point that would suddenly cause a huge drop-off all on their own with sexual activities. They did also look at asexuals, yay us, we were included, because the professor did note that they had seen a rise in asexuality as an identity. However, the proportional increase in people who identified as ace versus the amount that sex went down doesn't match up, and so that by itself can't really be used as an explanation. Some other possibilities included a decrease in alcohol consumption. However, the conversation inevitably turned to the rough sex hypothesis. In your paper, you bring up increases in, quote, rough sex as potentially contributing to declines. Can you explain what you mean by rough sex and how it could be playing a role in these changes? Especially for those 18 to 29 years old, there have been increases in what many people call rough sex behaviors. Limited research suggests that an early idea of this was what I would consider fairly vanilla rough sex. Pulling hair, a little light spanking. What we see now in studies of thousands of randomly sampled college students is choking or strangling during sex. The behavior seems to be a majority behavior for college-age students. For many people, it's consensual and wanted and asked for, but it's also scary to many people, even if they learn to enjoy it or want it. It's a major line of research for our team to understand how they feel, what the health risks are, and how that fits into the larger sexual landscapes. Looking into the citations for this paper, it appears this is not the first time that Herbernick has looked at choking as an emergent rough sex practice. An earlier study, also published in 2021, specifically looked at women's experience with choking during sex. The sample size was small, only 24 participants, but rather than the typical survey approach, they instead did detailed interviews with each woman. As part of their introduction, they discussed that previous studies in past decades described the behavior as relatively rare, but has become more common over time, with one study from a specific college campus estimating that as many as 58% of women had been choked during sex, whereas previous studies had estimated that number at 13 to 20% or lower across a wider age range. They also remarked that until the time of the study, only one other paper had looked at consent with regards to choking. A 2020 examination found that over half, 53%, of all college students that had been choked had either not been asked for their consent at all or only sometimes had been asked for their consent. At the same time, another 2021 study on the prevalence of rough sex behaviors in young adults found that over 30% of men had choked a partner during sex 5 times or more. What really struck me about this paper, though, is how it examined people's mental connection between the act of choking and BDSM. We were also struck that most participants did not describe choking during sex as connected to power exchange, kink, or BDSM, even though some women use terms like dominant or submissive. Most participants were not connected to kink or BDSM communities, nor had they attended kink events. They often described approaches to choking that were not supportive of safer, pleasurable exploration. For example, choking was often initiated without conversation or consent, occurred while intoxicated or drunk, and involved little to no effort to learn technical skills to reduce risk or call for help as needed. One woman, after the interview closed, mentioned that her boyfriend had a prior partner who once passed out while he was choking her. He didn't know what to do, so he just waited to see if she revived or not. Others did not know that it was possible for people to die while being choked. Okay, this is where the implications of these studies really start to genuinely worry me, because it's not just that these people are not connected to the BDSM community. It's not just that they don't know about safe words or SSC or aftercare, any of those other little things, right? It's that they are not looking for help. They are not looking for resources. They don't even know that they should know that it's dangerous, and they don't know that they could potentially die for doing something like this. And their right to obtain that information, their right to know what risk they are taking on, is being removed from them because people are doing it without even having a conversation about it first or making sure they are getting consent. And as possibly the most risky BDSM behavior you could be engaging in, it is very troubling to me that people are doing it in possibly the least risk-aware way possible. And that needs to change. However, before I completely finish up that rant about how we address this issue, I do want to answer the question that is probably on everyone's mind, which is, where the heck are people getting the idea that non-consensually choking their partners is hot? The obvious gut reaction, of course, is to blame pornography. However, it's not as simple as finding a single scapegoat. Few women referenced pornography as a direct influence on their own initial learning about choking, although most referenced having seen choking in pornography at some point. Many women describe pornography as playing a role in their partner choking them. Our findings clearly indicate that pornography is not the sole source of learning about choking during sex. Indeed, participants described noticing references to choking within a large and diverse body of media, including magazines, social media, mainstream television and movies, and popular erotica. So while porn does seem to play a role in influencing people towards rough sex behaviors, it also appears to be more indicative of a larger social and media landscape where choking is normalized, rather than being the sole representation of it. Finally, I want to look at one last study which examined the prevalence of feeling scared during sex across a wide range of ages, genders, and socioeconomic backgrounds. The long-form survey of more than 2,500 people found 23 individuals who had specifically described choking as an aspect of a scary sex experience. Now, for context, this was more than almost any other individual thing mentioned by the participants. More than unexpected STI scares, more than unexpected unprotected sex, more than sudden aggressive behavior from a partner, more than being restrained by a partner, more than any other act of BDSM, and more than actual threats from their partner. The only things that were named more often by the participants were two things: anal and actual acts of assault. The participants described their experiences with simple phrases like started choking me, choked me, or had hands around my neck. Some described feeling in danger. I felt I was being strangled, and put their hand on my throat and was scared they would actually choke me. One woman wrote, put his hand on my throat to where I almost felt couldn't breathe. Others described nearly or actually losing consciousness. Choked me to almost passing out. Being choked until you black out. And they wanted to try breath play or choking. I said I didn't. They started choking me before I consented and I passed out. So, while many people do enjoy consensual choking as part of their sex, that is far from a universal experience. I am not sharing this information to shame people that get pleasure from choking or who have it as a regular part of their routine. I am sharing this to shed a light on the fact that many people are experiencing non-consensual choking and that behavior does appear to be on the rise. Many people have scary initial experiences with kinky sex to the point it scares them off from ever trying it again, or it causes them trauma that goes forward into their future relationships. There are many people that have the completely wrong-headed idea that asking for consent in the moment ruins the moment, that women just need to be taken in order to enjoy sex, and that women don't actually want to be collaborative partners as part of a mutually enjoyable sexual experience. And I think if we start with that basic building block of consent being good and necessary and something that doesn't have to ruin the moment, that could have a lot of positive effects, whether that be in future sex ed curriculum or through workshops on college campuses or merely in our own lives in conversations we have with our own partners. However, we cannot ignore the fact that a lot of people are choosing to engage in this even consensually, not knowing what the risks actually are for what they're doing because they simply don't know it's dangerous, or they don't know there are resources, or they think that looking for resources somehow confirms their sexual inexperience in a negative way. And I just really hope here that as we come to understand that rough sex is part of the normal spectrum of human sexuality, that we'll just be more comfortable looking for resources, talking about those things, admitting we want to do it, and then also being able to fairly assess what is more dangerous and what is less dangerous. And I'm hopeful at some point we will have more proactive education that is teaching people about the risks of these things before they actually get to doing it. However, I imagine that is going to be quite a far way off at this point. So until then, if you see a vanilla person or anyone really having a conversation about choking or talking about an experience they had with choking, please don't shame them for not knowing about how dangerous something is. I think instead we should turn this into an opportunity to have a real conversation because it might be the only one that person ever has. Now, all of this being said, there was so much that I didn't have time to get into in this video. Like, what are the actual risks of choking? What can you do if something goes wrong? How can you bring up doing this in a consent-minded manner with a partner? Could there possibly be some kind of underlying gender dynamic in the sudden prevalence of choking? So many little extra thoughts and details that I want to make sure to talk about at some point. And if that does interest you, you can let me know about that in a comment down below. And just in general, I would love to hear your thoughts, opinions, experiences, anything else you would like to share. Again, you can put in a comment down in the comment section below. If you want to make sure to not miss out on any of my other videos, including a follow-up video to this one, if you have not already, please do subscribe because I make videos twice a week about all sorts of kink and BDSM related topics. And finally, if you want to support what I do, the best way you can do that is with Patreon. A link to that will be down below. If you do already support me over there, thank you so much. It means the absolute world to me. And until I see you all next time, I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.